Money. We all love it, but sometimes we don't know what to do with it. Might be the case for you if you're going to Korea, because Korean money is a little bit different to a dollar, or I assume euros. I've not actually been to Europe before. In this video, I'm gonna teach you how to count in Korean, very simple counting, so that you know when someone says 3만 원, you know that that's 30,000, as well as the major place value units, because that's pretty much, you need to know your place value units really well, because Korean money is sort of like weirdly inflated. That's 1,000, but that's nowhere close to $1,000 worth. So technically there's two ways of counting in Korean. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 하나, 둘, 셋, 넷. 1, 2, 3, 4 is Sino-Korean, so it's actually very similar to Japanese. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereas 하나, 둘, 셋, 넷 is pure Korean. Pure Korean is typically used for counting, talking about people, as well as telling time, and up to about 99. After 99, we typically go into Sino-Korean, where it's typically used for money, phone numbers, and things like that. However, since we're mostly talking about money, I'll be teaching you some basic Sino-Korean number counting. So 1 means 1, 2 means 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. After 10, it goes 11, 12. So that basically just goes 10, 1 and 10, 2. However, likely you don't really need to know that, but you just really need to know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Once you know those Sino-Korean number counting, so you also then have to know your place values. So there's 10, 100, 1000, 만, 10만, 100만. So that is 10, 10, 100, 100. I don't know why I'm doing these hand gestures. I don't have 100 fingers. There's 1000, 1000, 만, 10,000, and 10만, which is 100,000. The ones that are important from those place value names are 1000 and 만, because that's likely to be the most used unit of money that you'll come across in Korea. So let's have a look at Korean money, and I'll talk about how much they're worth as well as who's on them, because every country's notes tell a beautiful story about what kind of country they are and what kind of history they have and the values they have. I'll start with the notes, because these days you're not really likely to see coins, so these will be the most relevant one for you if you're traveling and getting money from the exchangers. We have 1000won, which is 1,000 won. 1000won. This handsome man right here is Lee Hwang, a Confucian scholar. And if you want to know more about him, you can go and visit Dosansaewon in Andong, and there is a place dedicated to him. It is blue, it says 1,000 there, so that you know it's 1000won. So 1000, 1,000. Typically, you'll need a multiple of these to pay for much of anything these days. However, these are great for street snacks and convenience stores, and if you need to split bills between your friends. Though I will go into that a little bit later, as that's not much of a culture in Korea. Typically, you'll find that these disappear very fast if you are going about your day and snacking as you go, and you'll also accumulate them quite rapidly if you're like me and visit 7-Eleven too often and pay with a bigger bill for no good reason. And the next unit up is 5,000원. So 5 means 5, 1,000 means 1,000, so 5,000 won. So 5,000 won. It says there 5,000 won. Okay, 5,000. It is yellow beige colored. This man here is known as Yi Yi. He was a famous policy advisor and a Confucian prodigy. Okay, a very famous scholar. If you want to know more about him, go to Ojukhyun House in Gangneung. There is a museum there as well as his birth home that had been turned into a museum, obviously. Typically, you're probably using these as something to replace a bunch of 1,001 bills, and they can, I would say these come out at lunchtime for me, because I'm looking at eating something off the street, so they're about 4,000 to 6,000 or maybe even 7,001, and these will be what I'm using on top of these 1,000won bills. As well as you might be pulling these out for taxis and maybe laundromats and things like that. So still relatively a small bill, but hopefully one that you'll be using quite a bit. I would say I carry these more than any others, mostly because that's what I ended up with. However, they are arguably one of the more versatile ones. Next unit of measurement is 10,000won. So we're jumping up in our place values, so 4 zeros there, 10,000 won. And on here is Sejong Daewang, or Sejong the Great, Man-won, Sejong the Great. He is the inventor of Hangul, and if you want to know more about him, there is a statue of him next to a statue of Yi Sun-sin in Ganghamun. And there is also the National Hangul Museum next to the National Museum of Korea in Seoul. He is one of the greatest leaders that Korean people ever had. This green bill is probably your second most used one, as it is sort of the de facto denomination for a dinner-sized meal, I would say. As well as I do find that typically touristy places use this as its default price when dealing with foreigners. I can tell you that those places are likely quite inflated comparable to everywhere else that serves mostly Koreans. How you figure that out, maybe I'll go into that later. So taxis, big long taxi rides, as well as sit-down meals inside a restaurant, okay, not on the street. Then we have our largest bill in Korea, so 5,000won, so 5,000 won. It kind of has a darker shade than this, and it's a different color, so you won't mix it up, but do look for the 4 zeros because it's 50,000, not 5,000. This is the biggest note that you can find in Korea, and it is likely the one that the ATMs are spitting out for you if you're getting money out at a global ATM. If you want to know more about this person who's on here, this is Shin Sa-imdang, one of the greatest women in Korean history. She was an artist as well as mother of Yi Yi, who was featured on the first 1,001 note that we had a look at. If you want to learn more about her, you can go back to the Ojukhyun House, where she gave birth to Yi Yi. Typically, you won't really be breaking these out except to break them. Do ask if the store is happy to accept these. It used to be considered quite rude this is like 20 years ago when I used to live in Korea, by the way. It used to be considered quite rude to just hand these off to the workers, because this is like paying with $100 bill, okay? So they might not have the change for it. You have to ask and be like, hey, can you break this? Are you happy to accept this after my services have been rendered? Maybe not in that way, because that's a psychotic way to ask. Just ask, 5만 원 써도 돼요? That means, can I use 50,000 won note? That's mostly talking about when you're in street stalls and things like that are usually dealing with much smaller amounts of money. However, if you're at a hotel, you're going to the intercity transport, hell, you want to pay cash for airport like domestic travel, you pull these out. That's really it. Or you're at one of the billion bloody shopping malls in Korea. Go to Starfield, by the way, best library I've ever seen. You'll be pulling these out. This is typically the bill the ATMs will stick out. I do suggest that you break them, as I've said. Lastly, there are the coins. I don't have 10 and 51 coins. 10원, 50원. They have rice stalks and tabotap pagoda on them. And if you want to know more about them, go to Bulguksa in Gyeongju. However, the reason I don't have them is because it's not really used at all. In this trip that I was on just now, I didn't see a single store that had 10-cent denominations on there anywhere. Perhaps if you go to the countryside, there will still be some areas where they'll be taking it. But if you do end up with them, I do suggest that you just take them home as a form of souvenir, honestly. There was even a government push to get these out of circulation, which largely failed. However, because of that, if you want to top up your transport cards, T-Money cards, which I'll go into later, you can use those for these as well. There is, however, a bigger denomination of coins, which are in the 백원 denomination, which is hundreds. 101, and this is on the 101 is 이순신 장군, or General 이순신, one of the greatest generals Korea's ever had, and the one who defeated the Japanese in the Imjin War. As you can see, he is the only military figure on our money, and you can tell Korea always valued scholarly achievements as well as cultural outputs rather than military outputs. However, this is a figure that should never be ignored when studying Korean history. His statue is right next to the statue of King Sejong, so if you're going there to go see King Sejong's statue, I suggest that you also go and learn about him next to it as well. These are alright for vending machines, yeah, that's really it. Again, you will accumulate a few of these because going into the hundreds denomination is still quite common. However, it is a bit of a pain. I suggest you go to Daiso and get yourself a little coin wallet for about $2. Then we have 500won. It has a red crown crane on there, which is a symbol of longevity. These are nice to have for lockers and stuff in public spaces, as well as laundromats, you know, coin laundromats and things like that. However, again, 100won, 100won, 500won, they do become quite cumbersome, and not a lot of places really care for them. And some places, if you pay with bigger amounts of money, they might not even give you coin back, even though you should be getting coin back, so they don't stock any coin anymore. So just something to think about. However, this 500won coin, so 500 won coin, is not even worth $1 in New Zealand money. That means this 100 won coin is even less, and therefore that's why these denominations are quite often ignored. It used to be that you could pay for bus fares with these, but all buses have gone completely contactless payment only, so there's that. So on the other hand, cash is kind of becoming a bit of a rarity in Korea, as most places are taking card nowadays. So if you have a Visa or a MasterCard, they will likely work in most places that take card. However, they might not. Korea has kind of their own ecosystem, and there's a couple of large companies that have developed their own NFC, no, not NFC, the tap system, as well as card chips, and some vendors only accept those and won't accept Visa or MasterCard, which can be a bit annoying if you're traveling with a Revolut and a Wise card like I typically do. To continue on with that, some kiosks and machines will only accept Korean cards, and it will say IC denied or can't recognize IC when you insert your overseas cards. That's why I do suggest that you carry some cash, especially for street food and small towns who might not actually still have a card payment system built in. Generally speaking, there are, if you're in Seoul or Busan, there are kiosks everywhere, especially for fast food restaurants and things like that, but even independent chains will have kiosks for everything, and none of them will ever accept cash. It will be card only payment. If you want to pay cash, you'll have to walk up to the register, unlike the rest of the people who are able to pay in less than a second by using their face or something like that. I would say that typically speaking, 90% of your spending will likely be with a Wise or a Revolut card. I did that backwards. And you don't really need to get that much cash out. However, I suggest you do hold on to whatever you say 10 to 20% of your daily spending, your planned daily spending will be in cash, as some places just won't accept your card, just your card, everybody else's will work just fine, or some market stalls and things like that won't have card access. The other thing with needing cash is that this card here, this is called a T-Money card. This is the transport card for Korea, and so T-Money, wait, no, what's this here? T-Money card. To top these off, you need cash. You actually can't use a card to top up a T-Money card. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at getting cash out at an ATM. So I must say, I do like using cash in Korea because it makes you feel like a rich man. There are mobile and contactless payments, however, Apple Pay and Samsung Pay are not really a thing. They have been becoming a thing, however, they're not universal yet. And Kakao Pay and Naver Pay and Zero Pay is for Korean bank account holders only, so you can't use them. You also won't be able to use QR codes to pay for stuff, as they also require that you have a Korean bank account. And going back to the T-Money card for transport, this is mine, or I guess this is my shared one with my parents and my family, because we only really need one for everybody. These are very convenient because they work for buses, subways, most convenience stores actually, as well as taxis. These are only rechargeable with cash. And those machines are typically only in Korean, except in major stations. And I suggest that you just ask the station attendants if they can help you out with this. If you do end up putting too much money in this, you just need to spend 500 won and it will refund you all the money, so you can do that before you leave Korea as well. And lastly, on terms of transport, typically speaking, 1,400 or 1,400 won is the base fare for all buses and trains in Seoul. Mostly in Seoul, it might be the case in other areas. So keep that in mind when you're topping these up, so that you can keep track of how much you need to spend. Now going back to getting money out, typically there are places that will say global ATMs. I suggest you go to Shinhan, KEB Hana, or 7-Eleven and get money out there. They're the most likely to actually accept Visa or MasterCard, and typically they will have a withdrawal fee of 3,000 or to 6,000 won or so, on top of whatever your credit card or debit card's foreign exchange fee is. I do suggest you avoid airport counters for better rates and go to an actual bank if you want to deal with a human, and they're open 9 to 4 p.m. during weekdays. I really do suggest that you bring a backup card. I carry 3 cards with me. I carry my Wise card, my Revolut card, which is my backup card, and I have a backup card, which will be my New Zealand credit card from ASB. You will have a different situation depending on where you're from and what kind of fintech is available to you. Again, like I said, you can use this like a debit card as well, or like a prepaid card, and that's what I do tend to do if I'm just traveling in Korea and carry a bunch of cash with me, because if I lose this, it's no sweat. If I lose these, it's a bit of a hassle. Lastly, in terms of talking about all that, when you buy something for more than 30,000 won or 3만 won in one store, you can get tax-free refunds only at stores that are marked as such. However, most large stores and malls will be, and you can either get a refund in in-store kiosks or at the airport. You do need to have your passport on you, and unfortunately, if you're a Korean person living outside of Korea, visiting on a Korean passport, it will deny you this functionality. Typically, it's about 5%, so whether or not that's worth it is entirely up to you, but free money is always free money. Lastly, I know this video is probably long enough, but I wanted to go quickly over what everything's kind of worth in Korea, very roughly, so that you've got an idea of how much you're spending. So for me, 1 New Zealand dollar is worth about 800 won. So that's what I'm going off of. So when I do my math, I typically just drop 3 zeros on all my notes. So drop 3 zeros. This is roughly worth $1, okay? A little bit more than $1. And then add 20% if I'm being really, really meticulous and feel like doing some extra math. However, if you're from the US or Australia or Europe, I think for you dropping 3 zeros is more accurate, and typically this will be less than $1 for you. So let's say you want to get some street food. You're looking to spend about 4,000 or 5,000 won. So 4,000원, 5,000원. Okay? If you're spending more than this, I would say you're probably getting ripped off. Okay? If you're getting a basic meal, you're probably looking at about 9,000 to 12,000. That's really on the expensive side, by the way. That's with drinks. One for your meal. If you're getting coffee, I've seen anything cheap as 2,000 won for on-the-go coffee. They're usually cheaper than being able to stay in store, as well as all the way up to like 5,000 won. If you want to get Korean barbecue for 2 or like chicken for 2, you're looking at about 2만 won, so 20,000. So food is, I would say, still affordable compared to New Zealand, because I can't get a meal below $15 anywhere, and $15 I'd be looking at like a baguette stuffed with salad. In terms of accommodation, you probably look for hostels. If you book early, 20,000 to maybe 30-40,000 won. Shared dorms, a budget motel or yogwan is about 4 to 70,000, so 40-70 bucks. And a mid-range hotel, you're looking at anywhere between 100,000 to 150,000 roughly. Transport, as I said, subway and bus typically starts at 1,400 and it will go up, and you won't really know until you tag out on the other side how much more that you paid, but 1,400 is the base fare. So if you're only going a couple of stops over, you're looking to spend that much money. Intercity bus, you're looking at anywhere between 10,000 to 30,000 or so 만원 to 3만 won. And KTX from Seoul to Busan, or the way back, so one way, is roughly 60,000 won. And in Seoul, the taxi base fare is 48,000, and that will actually take you quite a bit far ways. However, Seoul and Busan has some of the best public transport in the world, and I do suggest you take advantage of that as much as you can. If you're staying long enough to do some groceries yourself, a packet of instant noodles will cost you 2,000, a liter of milk 3,000, bananas 3,000-4,000, soju 2,000, a shirt from Uniqlo 29,000 to 39,000. If you don't have Uniqlo in your country, like I don't, it's actually pretty worth it. In terms of some basic services, if you want a haircut, like I desperately need one, 10 to 15,000 or so. If you're going to salon, so like when I took a haircut, that's not going to a beauty salon, that's just going to hairdressers for like a quick cut, looking at like 25 to 50,000. Coin laundry, 2-4,000 wons or so. You'll likely spend about 30,000 for about 10 gigs of data for 30 days in Korea. However, there is Wi-Fi available pretty much literally anywhere in Korea, especially in big cities. Like KTX even has Wi-Fi. The moving train has Wi-Fi, okay? I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if domestic airline had Wi-Fi. I'm dead serious. So I typically budget for 1 gig per day, right? However, in Korea, I was spending less than half a gig, or maybe a third of a gig per day. So take that as you will. If you're the type to scroll through every second you have available to you, maybe you do need more, but I really only ever use my phone for navigation when I'm out and about, so there's that. And truly, lastly, I just wanted to give you a few notes on a couple of differences you might have when it comes to spending money in Korea compared to your culture. When you eat out as a big group with a bunch of your friends or family, typically in Korea, it is not expected that anybody would ask for split bills. 1 bill per table is normal. And if say you go out there and you're working in Korea or something, and your 선배, so someone who's been working there for longer than you have, buys you food, don't ask to split it. Just next time, go buy them food, or just go like suck up to them a little bit, okay? That's normal in Korea. Don't ask to divide. Restaurants will hate that and they'll look at you like a freak. The other thing is, in terms of Jeju and countryside, you might not even have a chance to use any of these at all. So if you do plan on going to anywhere but Seoul and Busan and Jeonju and Tucson and like some of the big cities, I suggest that you get tons of cash out for it. I know that money isn't exactly the most exciting part of travel, but we all have to use it, and I hope you learned something from this video. I try to condense everything I have in terms of my knowledge of Korean money as best as possible, and hopefully as entertaining as possible to you. If you have learned something, please leave me a comment. Please leave me a comment if I got something wrong. I'm not really Korean. I am Korean by birth, but I've been living most of my life in New Zealand. This is all the things I wish I knew when I visited Korea to visit family for the first time in a long time. So if this helped you, press that like button, subscribe, and I hope you have a good day. And if you're looking to head to Korea, I hope you have a wonderful trip. Take care. Peace.